Some of you may remember there was an old TV commercial that said you can't put 2 ton of fertilizer in a 1 ton truck. Well, I'm the guy that actually can put 2 ton of fertilizer in a 1 ton truck. This was the original shop that I had. This picture is about 15 years old. This was in our old place over in western Wisconsin. 110 square feet of shop space, and believe it or not, there's a table saw, a bandsaw, a lathe, a jointer, a drum sander, and a bunch of other stuff all jammed into that little area back there. When we bought that house, it was a 2.5 stall garage, but it was a very small garage, and I wound up with the back end of the garage as my workshop area. And when we moved to the Green Bay area, one of our requirements was to find a place that had either a shop space or a garage that could be remodeled and upgraded to facilitate a shop. And we found this. This house was originally built with a 2.5 stall garage. They added the third stall on, and the garage was a 35-foot deep garage, so there was quite a bit of space. And the combined area of the original garage and the addition was a little over 1,500 square feet, so it's a pretty good sized area. The one problem that they had, they created, is when they tore down the wall between the original garage and the addition, they didn't bother to put any bracing in overhead, and the ceiling and the roof were on its way to collapse. It would actually sagged about an inch and a half over the 2 years that they had done that project. So part of the requirement was is that they put the wall back up, and in putting the wall back up, we decided to divide the third stall into a shop area that's 14 by 23, and then there's a storage room behind it that handles garden equipment and some wood storage and some other stuff like that. And as it turned out, I wound up with what I thought would be a pretty decent little garage or workshop space. This is the sign over the door going into the shop. And when you walk in, this is the first thing you see. The two Powermatic lathes. The one in the foreground is a new one. It's a 2014, and the one in the background is the one that we call the Mustard Monster. That's the 3520C. It's actually the replacement for the model that we have at the Artisan Center. Has most of the same features and quite a few improvements on it. You'll notice in the bottom of it, there's what appears to be just a shelf. That's actually a weighted shelf, and the combined weight between the shelf with the sandbags and so forth that are packed into it and the lathe, this lathe weighs about 850 pounds, so it's not going anywhere. I added the 2014, the spring of this year, because there are quite oftentimes, especially in doing segmented work, when two lathes really come in handy. I don't use a gluing jig to compress the rings in my segments. I do all of my segment construction on the lathe itself, and it's really handy to have one lathe operating essentially as a big clamp while the other lathe is handling some other gluing or turning operation. And the 2014 is kind of an upgraded version of a mini lathe or a midi lathe. It's not really a full-size lathe, but it has a lot of full-size lathe features. And one of the things that was attractive to me about it is the fact that I can use all my chucks and face plates and so forth on either lathe because it does have an 1.25 inch spindle. Also like the remote control on the pendant. Sitting next to the lathes is my tool rack. That's basically just a rolling shop cabinet with a topper that I built that'll handle 24 tools. And more than anything else, it's a convenient place to lay stuff. So it's usually stacked up with, parting tools, mallets, and whatever else I can think of to throw on there. Overhead, and this is kind of based on what I saw at Kelly's shop some time ago, is a rack that was, my original idea was just to hang lights from it. But it occurred to me that it was kind of a waste of space, so I put some magnetic strips up, and I'm able to not only suspend my lights from it, but also some of my measuring tools. And the space above I'm able to use for storage. What you see above there, the red and gray and so forth, is tool rolls with unhandled tools in them, tool handles, and there are a couple of boxes of pen blanks and some other stuff up there. So it's a convenient storage area. Uh, this is a workbench that I built I think about 16 years ago now. It's Douglas fir, which is actually a softwood, but this thing is held up pretty well. It has a 3-inch thick top and comes in real handy for any kind of shop work that I do. I originally built this thing for building furniture, and I haven't done a lot of flat work in the last few years, but still the workbench is one of the things that's kind of an essential for me in the shop. 14-inch jet bandsaw. It has a 6-inch riser block in it, so it does pretty much whatever I need to have it do. And next to it is a Laguna Cyclone dust collector. This dust collector is not hooked up to ductwork. I have a hose that I drag around from one machine to the other. In a shop space this small, to me, and especially with the configuration that I've got with the garage door and cabinets, it didn't make sense to try to put up a lot of ductwork. And it really hasn't been that big of an inconvenience to drag the hose from one machine to the other because I'm the only one working in here anyway. I kept my old jointer. Don't use it very much, but when I need something jointed, flat and straight, it still comes in pretty handy. I like this for when I'm doing segmented work, so that I can get the strips that I'm cutting flat and straight. And next to it is my miter saw. It's a Hitachi 12-inch sliding miter saw, and it's a fairly low-priced saw. I think I gave $300 or $400 for it at Menards on sale about 10 years ago. And despite the fact that it's an economy saw, it still has been dead accurate out of the box and very reliable. I've had good luck with this saw. Below it, you'll see my planer. It's actually a swivel top cabinet that they're mounted in. The planer doesn't see much use anymore, but again, it comes in kind of handy when my son-in-law needs to plane some boards down for something he's working on or something like that. The planer was kind of replaced by the drum sander. It's a Jet 1632 drum sander, and this is something that I consider to be a real essential for doing segmented rings. It does a nice job of flattening the rings, and it's a little bit slow for thicknessing, but I still can thickness wood down to a workable dimension that I need. Kept my old scroll saw. Don't use it very much, but every once in a while I have a grandson that comes over and does some work on the scroll saw, so it stays in the shop, and it does come in handy, for when I need something done with it. When we bought this place, we were working with bare walls in the garage area, and didn't have much time to make the move. So instead of building cabinets myself, which would have probably taken forever, contracted with Redline Garage Gear to have custom-built cabinets built. These lockers are 16 inches deep. They're 3 feet wide, and they store a lot of wood, finish, tools, whatever. I'm not going to open any of them up for you because I don't want you to see the mess that's actually inside, but they're a very nice cabinet arrangement, and they've held up pretty well over the last 8 years. This is a portable dust collection unit that I can hook up to the Cyclone. I use this when I'm working in an area of the shop that doesn't have a dust right connector. I think Tim mentioned that he had gotten some equipment from Rockler, some dust collection equipment, and the dust right stuff does work pretty well, especially if you're using a hose like the big hose that you see there from one machine to the other. And this is the arrangement that I've got for dust collection on the big lathe. This is very similar to a unit that's sold by Craft Supplies. This is a knockoff of it, and I really wish that I would have bought the one from Craft Supplies because this one is a little bit spindly. They went cheap on some of the hardware, and turned out not to be such a great deal after all. I'm going to stay with it for a while, but I think eventually I'll either buy one of my own or I'll see if I can get the one that Al Conard has installed in his shop, because I think he bought the Craft Supplies version. That's a lot nicer piece of gear. Um, the center of most cabinet builders' shops is their table saw, and you know I like the saw stop. It's been a good performer for me. It gets a lot of use for segmenting, but it hasn't done any flat work for a good long time and probably will stay that way. Uh, this is my grinder station, and on the right-hand side, my vacuum chuck or vacuum pump. Vacuum pump is actually mounted on a grinder stand that's on wheels, so I can wheel it over by the lathe, hook it up, use it, and then put it back over in the corner. Uh, the grinder is equipped with a couple of CBN wheels, and I bought these CBN wheels I think about 7 years ago, and I would never go back to friables. I love these things. It keeps my tools nice and sharp. They don't change diameter, and I've always thought that the CBN wheels were a really sound investment. Uh, Next to that's my drill press. Not much of a drill press. It's an economy tool from Menards, but it does what I need to have it do. Eventually, I think I'll probably be upgrading it to one of the digital electronic drill presses from Nova. The one downside to these variable speed drill presses like this is actually a knockoff of a Jet product. The one downside to them is that they use a Reeves drive for the speed control, and this will only go down to about 600 RPMs, which is really too fast for anything over about a half-inch or three-quarter-inch Forstner bit. You start driving big Forstner bits too fast, and you wind up with all kinds of problems. So I think I may eventually go to one of the new Nova drill presses like the Viking that can slow down to just a couple revolutions per second. But other than that, it seems to do pretty well. Next to that, 12-inch disc sander. If you're doing segmented work, a disc sander like this is pretty much a requirement. The jig that you see mounted on it is a jig that is designed to fine-tune the angles. Because even though I use a specialized sled on the table saw, every so often I'll get a segment or a bunch of segments in a ring that don't quite mate up. And in segmented wood turning, if you don't have good glue joints, you don't have anything at all. So that jig helps me correct a lot of those problems. Next to it is an old grinder. Somehow or other, some kind of an accident, I managed to bend the shaft on the left-hand side of it. So instead of tossing the thing, I left a friable wheel on the right in case I need to sharpen or grind, some of the softer metals. And on the left-hand side, I mounted a set of buffing wheels. So I use it to clean up some of my tools and do some general cleanup work. It works out pretty well for me. And more the custom cabinets. This is actually a countertop and an overhead set of cabinets just as you come in the door of the shop. Again, from Redline Garage Gear. For dust collection or air filtration, there's a Rikon air filter, and this thing runs just about any time I'm in the shop. I've had this hanging here for I think 7 years, and every couple of months I clean the filters out on it and replace the filters about every 2 or 3 years, and really been happy with it. For air conditioning, there's a mini split that does both heating in some of the warmer months of the year and cooling in the summer. And during the dead of winter, when it's below zero outside, I've got a hot dog gas heater overhead. This is a standing desk that I built. It's adjustable. It goes up to, I think the top goes up to about 4 feet high. As a matter of fact, I'm using it right now to hold the computer that I'm looking at behind my lathe. But it's kind of nice to have a rolling desk like this that has a cup holder and so forth. So that if I'm working on something at the workbench or at the work table in the shop, I can pull this thing along behind me, and it's stable enough that it handles computer and whatever else I want to put on top of it. And by the way, it's got a cup holder on the right-hand side too. So, and anybody that has a saw stop will probably recognize what this is. This is the one and only activation that I've ever had that cost me a blade and a cartridge. This was one of those things that was a stupid mistake. I had been making some cuts with an aluminum fence on the miter gauge on my saw, and I had done an angle cut, and I had forgotten to tighten the thumb screws that hold the fence in place. And on my next cross cut, the aluminum came in contact with the blade, and bang, it got real quiet in the shop real fast. So after I thought about it for a while, I decided to turn it into a clock, so anytime I want to know what time it is out here, I'm also reminded that that's a stupid trick that I don't want to pull again. And that's kind of a look at my shop.
Jerry, I think we're all curious why there's no evidence of sawdust in your shop.
Well, uh, when you have a small area like this jammed as full as this is, uh, if you let the dirt pile up too much, it's a real pain in the butt to clean. So I try to clean it up essentially at the end of every day or every project. It gets pretty messy sometimes. Like last week, I was doing yarn bowls, getting ready for the craft show season coming up, and this place was pretty well messed up. But between the dust collector, the two-horse dust collector, and also I've got a shop vac that has a cyclone on it. I forgot to show that. It has an Oneida cyclone on top of it. Uh, I have a set of wands for both of them, so I can vacuum the floor up pretty fast. And if you don't let the dirt accumulate, it doesn't get to be so much of a problem. That and the fact, too, that my wife is a lot happier with me not tracking all that stuff into the house like I used to.